What's up guys, Nathan here. I wanted to make a sort of unique video for this upcoming league start that I've never done before, and this is basically going to be a sort of economy tips and tricks video. At the start of a league, everybody needs items, and there's going to be items that are in more demand than others, and a lot of what the patch note reading is about is trying to look at the patch notes and decide, hey, these items are going to be more in demand than maybe they previously were. So if you can decide which items you want to chase and maybe farm up, then you can in turn sell those items and make a little bit more currency than you would ordinarily. This video, I have a nice dozen or so items that I think are going to potentially be hot, or at least, worth more than they have been in the past. And I'm going to go over them, give you guys a couple ideas of maybe how you can decide to farm them or sell them to other players. And then hopefully you guys can have a little bit of a leg up on the economy and just make a little bit of currency at the start of the league. So the first item I have for you today is actually Devoto's Devotion. Now, a lot of people are probably thinking, oh, Cyclone's dead, they murdered it, whatever. First of all, Cyclone's definitely not dead. And second of all, I think there's a lot of people who still just want to play Cyclone, because even though the range was heavily nerfed, let's be honest, it is still probably the best feeling melee skill in the game, whether it's hitting the entire screen or half of the entire screen. So if you want to farm Devoto's Devotions and try to get them out to all the, noobs out there that don't know how to do it themselves, there is a divination card called the Gladiator, and this was a huge moneymaker at the start of last league. I don't think it's going to be as big this league, but I wouldn't be surprised if Devotos are going for, 30, 40, 50C at the start of the league, and you can do that basically by farming arenas. And Arena is a tier 7 map, so you can do like sort of an early Atlas strategy where you chain arenas. Or if you want to push ahead a little bit further, there's also Colosseum and Pit. Both of these maps, all three of these maps, sorry, also drop the Gladiator Divination card. And when you farm the Gladiator Divination card, all you really need to know is you have a chance of getting Devotos and you have a chance of getting Bringer of Rain. I don't know how heavily it's weighted. I would assume Bringer of Rain is slightly more common, but I mean, these things like drop like candy in Arena. So if you're willing to do an Atlas strategy around a sort of subpar layout, which is basically Colosseum, Pit, Arena in my opinion, this could be a very good moneymaker for the first couple days of the league. Next up, I want to talk about Tremor Rod. Now, if we look at the patch notes, we can see that Tremor Rod got a couple of changes. Most notably, it now has increased levels of spell gems socketed in it, as well as no longer has the less mind damage tag. So as far as I'm concerned, this is an extremely high candidate or extremely good candidate, for miners. And I don't know how popular the miner archetype is going to be, because there's a lot of sort of apprehension about how they changed miners. But based on some of the comments I've been seeing on my videos and just some of the other content creators out there that are going to be playing miners, I think Tremor Rod might end up being a hot item. The bad news is there's actually no really great way to farm Tremor Rods. There's the Tower Divination card, which can be farmed in Residence and Tower, but there's a lot of staffs in the game, so I don't necessarily think this would be the best way to get it. What I would probably recommend doing, if you want to be a little bit unethical, is to set up your pathofexile.com/trade to snipe this item whenever it gets put up, because I think a lot of people are going to be going off the old value of Tremor Rod, which is usually, a 1 or 2C unique item. So if you can, snipe that for lower prices and then relist for higher prices, that's something that's a little risky, because obviously I can't guarantee you that's going to pay off, but it is something to consider if you want to hedge your bets on miners being as OP as some people think they're going to be. Next up, we have From Dust to Dust Jewels. Now, in case you've never played a skeleton build, From Dust to Dust is basically what lets you focus on having melee skeleton warriors, which is a very popular build, very high boss damage. I think it really only got buffed at this point, even though they did lose the 100% chance to hit. It's so much easier to get accuracy now, and you can do things like precision and war banner. So if anything, I think From Dust to Dust, aka Warrior Skeletons, is going to be really strong and probably a little bit popular, at least popular among starters. So unfortunately, there is not a really great way to farm these, but you should be able to snipe them pretty easily, because they go for a little bit, but not for a ton usually. So you're really just going to have to look at PoE Antiquary, and decide whether or not you want to try to get in on that honeypot, because you really have to make decisions and sort of make estimated guesses as to whether or not you think you're going to be able to turn a profit by sniping this. I personally wouldn't do this. I think it's a little bit risky, and I think other people are going to have similar ideas, but skeletons are definitely going to be meta, at least at the start of this league. So definitely something to consider, and I think it wouldn't be a horrible idea to try sniping and flipping these jewels. Next up, we have Klaus. Now, everybody knows Assassin, Poison Assassin is going to be a hot little option for a lot of people. I think Mathel is going to be league starting at it, and I hate to, you know, play into the Mathel effect because he hates that shit. But yeah, if you want to try to make a little bit of money off claws, the two most popular claws for poison builds are going to be Mortem Morsu and the Wasp's Nest, especially the latter. Mortem Morsu is probably more just like a very early game leveling claw, but there's a couple of ways to get these. One, you can snipe them because obviously they're going to be listed for much lower than they're probably worth right off the bat, especially Wasp Nest. That's the big one. And secondly, you can also farm Wolverines, which are the Corrupted Claw Divination card. Now, this is a little bit riskier for a couple of reasons. One, there's a shit ton of claws in the game. Luckily, I don't think Wasp Nest and Mortem Morsu are super rare as far as the way the weightings goes. Like, you're not going to be getting things like, you know, Hand of Wisdom in action. You're not going to be getting Scourges. So there's a small chance, but a reasonable chance to get these from the Wolverine. The only reason why I might hesitate to do this is because it is a corrupted claw, and claws have really good implicits. So if the claw is corrupted in such a way that it loses its really good implicit and doesn't get like a really good implicit in place of it, then this might not be the best way. But if you do feel like doing this, it's drops in Glacier. So if you haven't seen enough Glacier from last league, you can farm Wolverines and try to get a couple of these claws early on. I wouldn't rate this as a super reliable moneymaker, but it's definitely an option. I think some people will definitely be doing it. Next up, we have Golem Gems, or more specifically, Carrion Golem Gems. As somebody that's actually league starting as a Golemancer, I can tell you a level 21 Carrion Golem is going to be absolutely best in slot for me. Like, as soon as I hit like level 70, I'm going to probably be looking to get my hands on a level 21 Golem Gem. Unfortunately, they're not really going to exist unless there's people who are farming these cards, in which case people like me will be willing to pay a pretty penny to get that level 21 gem. So if you want to know how to get a level 21 gem, no, don't worry, you don't have to level a bunch of Carrion Golems and then corrupt them. There's actually a divination card called the Rite of Elements, and it drops all over the place. It drops in Courthouse, Coves, Flooded Mines, Geode, Grotto, Vault, Waterways, and Wharf. I'm guessing there's a chance that it just drops from the literal golem enemies in these maps. Like, for example, Wharf and Waterways both have, and Grotto, I think, all have golem bosses. So there's a chance it just comes from the boss, realistically. But that's what the wiki says, is you can get them on all of these maps. So definitely, this is one of the better div cards to farm, I think, and even if you don't feel like turning them in and hoping for that nice Carrion Golem, you can probably just sell the div cards themselves. I wouldn't be surprised if each of them sells for, you know, 4 to 5 chaos at the start of the league. Not going to promise anything, but I think this would be a very solid option to farm, especially if you do it on Waterways, because then you can be farming Tabula div cards as well. It's a really common early game strategy, and just the fact that you can bring in the Rite of the Elements into that is really good. Next up, we have the Golem Jewels. Now, the Golem Jewels is not something you can easily farm at all, and I don't even think you're going to be able to easily snipe these, because I think anybody with half a brain that is listing the Golem Jewels is going to be knowing what they're worth. Like, they're probably going to be... Yeah, I think people are going to know they're worth something. You're not going to be able to just get Primordial Harmonies like they're nothing. What you can try to do, and this is like super out there and probably going to be super hard to come by, and people aren't even going to know where this drops right away, but if you can get a leg up on people and figure out where the new div card Azarin's, I think it's called Azarin's Reward, drops, that's going to be a Corrupted Prismatic Jewel. There's only 2 possible outcomes. That's either a Watcher's Eye, which is a huge win, or a Anima Stone, which is absolutely required for every single Golemancer build because it basically gives you 2 more maximum golems. So I don't know where this is going to drop, and whenever somebody figures out where it drops, it's probably going to be super rare, but if you manage to figure out where it drops, I think farming it is going to be a very solid money maker. Just don't count on this one because it very easily could come from some late game ass content. So we'll find out, but I just wanted to point it out there. The Golem Gems are going to be worth a lot, or sorry, the Golem Jewels are going to be worth a lot at the start of the league. Next up, we have the Primordial Chain, and I'm definitely shooting myself in the foot here by telling you guys how big of a deal Golemancers are going to be, because I'm probably going to start with one, but I don't really care. I don't mind being poor. The Primordial Chain is basically the best in slot neck for Elementalist Golemancers, and it basically makes your golems have a little bit less life, a little bit less damage, but it also makes them really fast, and it gives you 3 more golems. So the best way to farm this, which is kind of interesting, it's not super reliable, but there's a divination card called Alone in the Darkness. And if you look at the Alone in the Darkness drop table, it has all of the delve items, including the delve boss drops. However, according to a test done by MBX Extreme, and I'm just reading this off the wiki right now, this isn't like crazy unique knowledge, the chances of actually getting boss drops from Alone in the Darkness is basically non-existent. So he did 60 sets and he didn't get a single boss drop. So we can basically cut out like half of the items on this drop table and not worry about them. And then Primordial Chain is probably weighted to be a little bit more likely to drop because it's not one of the, you know, crazier delve items. I don't know if this is going to be the most reliable way to farm Primordial Chains. I don't think there's going to be any other ways, but if you really want to do it, the good news is this card actually comes from Abysses, and Zana is a 2 Chaos for 1 Abyss, very early Zana mod, and you can do that on any map you want. So I think you can safely say this would be a very solid way to try to make a little bit of currency, because I think the people that get these early on are going to be making a nice little pretty penny from people like me who absolutely need it to get their Golemancers to start feeling good. Next up, we have one that is always sort of a good early league item, and that's Essence Worm. Essence Worm is good basically because Mind Over Matter builds are very strong league starters that are very easy to gear around, and Essence Worm is an item that's usually tied to just about every other Mind Over Matter build. Even myself, and again, I'm probably shooting myself in the foot here, Essence Worm is really good for my Mind Over Matter Essence Train build, and I know for a fact there's a number of people that are planning on playing that build. So if you want to farm that item for them and sell it to them, then getting an Essence Worm would not be a bad idea. There's also the idea of the new Hierophant, which is heavily reliant on having a ton of unreserved mana, and there's really no better way to do that than to use an Essence Worm or an Owl's Uprising, but Essence Worm is definitely going to be the cheaper, more accessible option. If you want to farm this, there's not a ton of easy ways, but you can choose to farm the Penitent. I don't know how to say that. I want to say Penitent. Okay, there's a divination card called the Penitent, and that drops a unique unset ring. And unfortunately, the drop pool is pretty big, but there's a bunch of crazy like league specific ones and really like rare, basically non-existent items like Angler's Plate, and I've never even seen a Mute Wind Seal before. So I think it's fair to say that Essence Worm is weighted to be a little bit more common, even though you're probably just going to get a lot of Malakai's Artifices, which is just a very shitty unset ring that people use for elemental equilibrium. I don't necessarily know if this is going to be the best thing to target because it's so unreliable and difficult, but if you can still get your hands on these, I do think Essence Worm is going to be worth something, especially on the very first day of the league. Next up, we have a couple of interesting ones. First of all, we have Zana Prophecies. Now, I think this is like a huge deal right here because not a lot of people farm Prophecies, and I know content creators love to bring it up and talk about how much money it is, but just a lot of people still don't do it. Farming Prophecies is the idea of just like taking tons of silver coins and just constantly re-rolling your Prophecies until you get desirable ones, and I think the a Master Seeks Aid, or whatever it's called, to get Zana to spawn in your maps, I think that's going to be super worth in the early league. First of all, it's always worth something in the early league because it's a really awesome free Atlas progression. And then secondly, more importantly, the only way you can access the synthesis bosses is via the Zana daily missions, or not daily, sorry, whatever, the Zana the map missions. And in case you didn't know, the synthesis missions drop some of the most busted OP items in the game, namely the Bottled Faith. Why am I losing it? The Bottled Faith Flask is absolutely insane for any crit build, just mind-blowingly better than any other flask you can use for like a decent crit build. And then there's also the rings, the Circle of Hate, Circle of Anguish, or whatever. Those are really OP too, especially for like, I think the Herald of Ash one and the Herald of Agony one are super good. But yeah, even if you don't want to farm them yourselves, if you just want to sell those Zana Prophecies, I think there will be a lot of players who are just buying them en masse and then just trying to sell them or trying to farm them and try to get those synthesis bosses. Because the synthesis bosses are going to be really rare. So if you don't want to deal with that RNG, just farm the Prophecies and sell the Prophecies to someone else. Next up, we have Legion Scarabs. Now, it is no secret that Legion is one of the most profitable League mechanics that has ever been put into Path of Exile, and one of the best ways to interact with Legion is going to be Syndicate. Syndicate is going to give you the option to get Scarabs, and the Scarabs are going to come from the research department with Vagan. Now, the good news is Vagan was typically completely snubbed. Like, most people that ran Syndicate they would try to put Vagan in a place where they would never have to see them. They would kick him out of the Syndicate. He was just garbage. And now he has all of these Legion-related stuff. So I think, especially because there's going to be people who don't read patch notes and don't realize that Vagan is super OP now, I think Legion Scarabs are going to be super good. And people are going to buy a lot of them, and people are going to pay a lot for them. So if you want to get your Vagan in your Syndicate and you want to move him to your research and just start farming those Scarabs, that's going to be really good. And I think it's going to potentially rival, I almost said Nico, Delve Scarabs, Sulfite Scarabs. So if you want to maybe put your Chimeria somewhere else, I don't know, or at least just not have him be the leader in exchange for Vagan being the leader of your research branch. Yeah, I think this is going to be the absolute, or not research. Sorry, it wouldn't be in research, would it? He would be in intervention. Let me double check that really quick. Patch, Blight, patch, notes. I don't want to mess this up for you guys because intervention. Yeah, you would want your Vagan in intervention, and that's how you're going to be getting those Legion Scarabs that are probably going to be super juicy, especially in the early league when people really want to see what they're all about. Next up, this is always a reliable moneymaker, but I think it's going to be even more so the case, and that is farming in power level 4s. Empower is almost always going to be a sort of best in slot damage gem for high level spell builds and minion builds, but especially this league, not only are minion gems going to be scaling really hard off level, but you're going to be getting additional minions by leveling up your gem. So that's a huge deal, and the best ways to farm Empower is obviously you can just quality them up and load up your offhand weapon slots with them, but there's also the Dragon's Heart Divination card, and I hardly ever see this card. I'm not gonna lie, I've probably run a couple hundred Pit of Chimeras, and I've only seen this card maybe a couple times, but I've never actually like focused specifically on Pit of the Chimera, which is where it drops. So maybe someone with more experience than me could, you know, say that this is worth your time. I don't know, but either way, getting level 4 Empowers and selling them to people who are playing minion builds is going to be a big money maker at all stages of the league. Next up, we have the Poet's Pen, and the Poet's Pen has always sort of been a meta item, more or less, but it took a pretty big nerf a couple leagues ago when they made it so it would only attack, or it would only trigger spells when you attacked with the pen itself. And it used to be you would attack once and both your Poet's Pen would trigger, but now you basically each attack with each Poet Pen triggers in an alternating fashion. But what they did this league is they lowered the cooldown from 0.25 to 0.15, which makes it so that even though it's not quite as good as it used to be, the cooldown is so low that if you can get enough attack speed, it's going to feel very close to pre-nerf Poet Pen. And in case any of you guys weren't around for pre-nerf Poet Pen, it was absurdly broken. One of the most common, strongest builds was the Volatile Dead Body Swap Unearth build. I played a lot of it. I played it as a Jug, and it was stupid. You know, you just do so much damage, and then you'd also be a Jug, so you would never die. I think Poet's Pen has a very strong chance to be meta again, and the best way to get Poet's Pen, of course, is to farm the Dab of Ink divination card, and that drops in Academy, Museum, Scriptorium, and the Library. The Library obviously is not a map. Scriptorium is actually a very solid map to farm, by the way. I've never farmed it myself because I don't love the layout, but it actually has the Offering div card, which is you know, Chevron's Wrappings, has the Aesthete, which is a Chevron item, which can also be a Chevron's Wrappings, and then the Trial, which is a random corrupted rare tier 15 map, which can be worth something. There's just a lot of good stuff going on for Scriptorium, so if you can deal with that layout, and it might be a much better layout knowing the new league mechanic, I think it would be a really good thing to run, so you can also farm those Poet Pen's divination cards and make a little bit of moolah. Next up, we have the Cora Letos signature Flask. Now, this is a Flask that has pretty much always been best in slot for poison crit builds, but as you probably guessed, poison crit builds are about to get a lot more popular. Unfortunately, there is no reliable way to farm this Flask, but I do think people are going to be undervaluing it. So if you're the kind of person that doesn't mind sniping, I do highly recommend sniping this if it's going for, 1, 2, or 3 chaos, because I think especially if you get a really good rolled one, 70, 73, 74, 75% increased duration of poisons you inflict during Flask effect, I think it's going to be going for a lot, especially when some streamer like Mathler or whatever goes and League starts with Cobra Lash. I think this is going to be a very nice flask that is going to sell for a lot. So if you can't snipe it, maybe just get lucky or just keep an eye out for it, because it's a very good flask for poison crit builds. And the last item I have for you today is actually going to be the Queen's Escape Ornate Sword. Now, I have to say, this sword has always sort of traditionally been a meme as far as weapons go for minion builds, because it's kind of like if you're playing a Spectre build, you probably want to be shield charging anyway. If you're playing a skeleton build, you probably want to use Femmers of the Saints. If you're playing a zombie build, you probably want to be using like a one of those pseudo 7-link stabs or something. But I think there's going to be a lot of people more interested in it for the increased movement speed this league, because there's going to be a lot of new minion players who are coming in, and they probably just want to have a nice fast feeling minion build with the new Feeding Frenzy support gem. They don't have to do anything, they just want their minions to run around and kill everything without them even having to look at their monitor. And for that, Queen's Escape does give up to 100% increased minion movement speed, which is a very valuable stat for those kind of AFK minion clearing builds. The good news is you can actually farm this item very easily by using the Queen's Decree into the misunderstood Queen Prophecy. So basically what you want to do is you want to get yourself a Queen's Decree with the highest possible maximum life and increased damage roll on it, and then you want to do the misunderstood Queen Prophecy, which basically just involves going and killing the Bone Queen in the Belly of the Beast level 1, which is literally just in Act 4. Super easy to do. And yeah, then you'll turn it into a Queen's Escape, and then if you get a good increased movement speed roll on top of that, you'll have a very nice looking Queen's Escape sword. And it's basically the same sort of rule as when you regularly do prophecies, which is people are too lazy to do the prophecy themselves, or they just want to look for the best roll possible on the item that they consider best in slot, and that's where Queen's Escape comes in, because you just made one of the best ones and most desirable ones possible. I can't give you an exact sort of profit margin, because it's hard to tell, but if you go through PoE Ninja and you go look at some of the more traditional meta prophecy items, and then you sort of look at the differences between prices, I think a good one would be whatever the Ahiri's Bite and Tahiri's Demise. That's always a good one to sort of base your profit margin off of, because the former is usually very cheap, but if you get a nice attack speed roll on it and then you roll it into Demise, it ends up being worth quite a bit. Like sometimes you can double or triple your money, and I wouldn't be surprised if Queen's Escape is going to be having a similar profit margin. So yeah, that about does it for my sort of meta money-making roundup. I hope you guys found this video interesting. I probably won't be doing any of these myself, except for maybe the Waterways trick, just because I want to farm up a level 21 carrion golem myself as quickly as possible. But yeah, I hope you guys found this video interesting, or at least a little bit helpful, and this is going to be my last video before the Blight League starts. So on that note, I want to say thank you guys so much for watching, and I wish you the best of luck in Blight.
Thank you!